we are at the final part of Madeleine's point of view. A curious contentment descended upon me when I finally abandoned myself to the dream and ceased to function with any pretense of sanity. When I accepted that heaven had looked with pity on my plight at last and sent me the perfect, beautiful baby that Charles had promised. When I accepted I had two sons. One was a monster, of genius, of inhuman and terrifying dimensions, but the other was as enchantingly normal as I could ever have wished for, and his welfare was my consuming obsession. I could not bear to be parted from him. Strangely, Erik showed no interest of this new interloper. At my request, he carried the old cradle down from the attic bedroom without a murmur, and watched me caress the carved wood when he had sat beside my bed. "You're happy now," he said quietly. "You don't want to marry Dr. Barry now you have the baby. You'll have to let me stay and look after, won't you?" I nodded dreamily as I bent over the cradle and began to arrange the lace coverlet. After a moment, I remembered to thank him for being so helpful. "If I'm helpful, you won't send me away, will you?" he persisted. "You'll let me stay here with you both." "Yes," I said vaguely. "I expect so." He gave a little sigh. I could not tell whether it was relief or satisfaction. I think he lingered a while watching me. I was not aware of the moment when he slipped away silently from the room. When Marie got out of her chair and stared at me, her face was as white as the color of her gown. I could not think why she looked at me like that. I had merely asked what she would like to look at the baby. She did not reply. She simply went on staring at me, and I wondered, with surprise, if she could possibly be jealous. I watched her grope her way across the room to the piano where Erik sat watching us. "Your mother is very sick," I heard her telling him in a low, strained voice. I am going to ask Dr. Barry to come and see her at once." "You must not do that," he said steadily. "Mother doesn't like Dr. Barry. She doesn't want him here in the house. If you bring him here, I will not let him in." "Erik," she protested helplessly, "you must try to understand that—" "I think you should go now, mademoiselle." His voice cut across her wavering tone with devastating authority, and I saw her stare at him for a moment with disbelief that had bordered on fear. Abruptly, she rushed back to me and began shaking my arm. "Madeleine, listen to me. I'm going to fetch your cloak and take you down to the village at once. I'm going—" Her voice broke on a grasp of terror as Erik's long fingers closed around her wrist. "I think you should go now," he repeated ominously. "I want you to go." She pulled away from his grasp and steadied herself against the mantelpiece. I saw with vague curiosity that she began to cry. "I must tell Dr. Barry," she muttered peevishly to herself. "I must tell him what terrible things are happening under this roof." "She doesn't want him here." I watched her back away as Erik began to walk steadily toward her. "And she doesn't want you either. Interfering, asking questions, you tire her." Marie stopped crying and looked at me as though she could not believe I had no move to correct his astonishing impudence. When Erik brought her the cloak and handed it to her, she took it from him without another word and followed him from the room like a sleepwalker. "You must not concern yourself," I heard him say calmly as he opened the door for her. "My mother is quite well, but she does not want visitors anymore. Good day, mademoiselle. Thank you for calling." If she made a reply, I did not hear it. I listened instead with calm indifference to the sound of the key turning in the lock and the bolt sliding into place. At length, he came back into the room and stood beside my chair, looking down at me solicitously. "Shall I play for you?" he asked. "Yes," I said dreamily. "Mozart, the piano concerto in C major." He sat down at the piano and began the cadenza, playing from memory with his familiar, effortless brilliance, wrapping me in a warm cocoon of languorous sounds that floated me even farther from reality. I had no thought, no desire, now to be left alone in a world entirely fashioned and furnished by his imagination. The day drifted, as all my days were beginning to drift, in a calm, unquestioning haze of dependence. All decisions and conscious thoughts had been taken from me. I was merely a contented spectator, able to observe with strong detachment. All day he sat and worked on a series of designs for a building unlike anything I had ever seen before. A building so extraordinary and bizarre that it was only the elevations, front, rear, and side, which made it recognizable to me as a structure at all. I waited patiently for him to finish and begin to play for me again, but he was transported by a fierce, elemental frenzy of creativity which I stared not disturbed. Repeatedly he screwed up sheets of paper and flung them into the fire with angry frustration. And when Sasha whined for attention and called at his end, he picked her up impatiently and shut her out in the dark garden. The last action was so utterly out of character that it penetrated the stupor of lethargy which gripped me. In that moment, I suddenly saw him as the grown man he would become, totally consumed by his obsessive quest for perfection, formidable and frightening in his ruthless desire to create. He was behind this summer, and already has touched with the awesome, unpredictable majesty of the ancient Greek gods. A time would come, as Father Mansard had foreseen, when he would no longer acknowledge the barriers and fears that confine and unite the human race. To be a law unto himself, untroubled by tiresome mortal questions of right and wrong. A soul entirely lost to God. It was dark when he finally laid his head down with exhausted satisfaction. I saw him glance automatically over to the hearth and checked in surprise. "Where's Sasha?" he demanded with concern. "In the garden." I frowned. "Don't you remember, Eric? She was annoying you, and you shouldn't put her out in the garden at night, Mother. It's too cold for her now that she's old." I sat in my chair, tried and condemned by his unwavering certainty, and dimly troubled by his curious lapse of memory. Would he always forget these deeds in which he did not wish to remember? Before I could collect myself sufficiently to reply to his accusation, the dull whining outside the front door changed to a frenzy of barking as Sasha deserted her patient vigil on the step and rushed to the gate. "Look!" shouted a voice down the road. "There's the monster's dog!" Through the window I caught the glare of lanterns, and a moment later a barrage of stones began to rain in the direction of the gate. When Sasha gave a yelp of pain, Eric leapt to his feet and rushed to the door, but I reached it first. "No!" I screamed. "Don't you see they're trying to lure you out there? They'll kill you if you go to them. Eric!" The eyes behind the mask were an insane yellow gleam of rage. When he threw me aside with violence that knocked all the breath out of my body, I struck my head on the newel post at the foot of the stairs. For a few moments I was too dazed to do anything except cower on the floor, listening with disbelieving horror to the ugly voices of the mob and Eric's awesome rage. Laughter and shouting, a man's high-pitched scream of pain, Sasha's frenzied barking rising to a crescendo and ending in one long, piteous howl. And then there is Eric's shriek of demented anguish. "I'll kill you! I'll kill all of you!" Swaying dizzily to my feet, I staggered to the open doorway. The lanterns were already swaying and bobbing down the road, giving off the demonic fury of an outraged child. When Eric struggled down the path with Sasha in his arms, I could see from the unnatural angle of her head that her neck had been broken by some savage blow. I stretched out my hand to him, but he pushed past me as though I didn't exist. Stunned with shock, I followed him into the kitchen, where I found him kneeling beside the bloody bundle of fur, his thin shoulders shaking with the harsh violence of his sobbing. In the light from the oil lamp, I was able to see the mask had been torn off in the struggle, and his yellow flesh slashed in several places. Blood was trickling from his eyes, and as he lifted a hand to wipe it away, I suddenly caught my breath. The blood on his shirt was not Sasha's, as I had first thought. The stain was growing, swelling forward, fed by some unseen knife wound within. An icy coldness gripped me as I put a trembling hand on my sleeve. "Come away now," I whispered. "There's nothing more you can do for Sasha." "I must bury her," he said with dull despair. "I must bury her and sing her a requiem." "You can't," I breathed in horror. "She will have a requiem," he sobbed. "A requiem to take her soul to God." "Yes," I said hastily, praying that I would not be forgiven for condoning this blasphemy. "But not tonight. You've been stabbed, Eric. Don't you realize that? You must come and rest while I attend to the wound." bury her, he repeated as though he had not heard a word I had spoken. He swayed to his feet, and though the red stain on his shirt had spread alarmingly, I knew I could not prevent him. Wounded and broken with grief, he was still stronger than I, still capable of throwing me across the room if I resisted his wild determination. Lifting down a lantern, I lit the way into the orchard at the back of the house with another word. I wept as I watched him struggle to dig a grave in the iron-hard soil. He would not permit me to help, and I crouched on the grass beside Sasha's slowly stiffening body, stroking the matted fur and winced at the labored sound of his every breath. I listened to the trembling notes of the Dies Irae. I closed my eyes and clung to the crucifix around my neck. Forgive him, Father. Forgive him. He's only an angry child. He does not understand how he sins. When it was done, Erik stumbled back into the house and collapsed on the sofa in the drawing room. I ripped open the sodded shirt, but there was so much blood that I could not immediately locate the side of the wound. I felt panic closing around me. Madeleine! I turned in relief to find Etienne standing in the doorway, his hat in one hand and his bag in the other. In a single stride, he seemed to be beside me, bending over the sofa in alarm. Who did this? He demanded with cold fury. I don't know. It was a crowd. 10 boys. They killed the dog. He struggled with them and then... Oh God, Etienne, is it serious? He frowned as he probed the wound with expert fingers. It's missed the lawn. He's been very lucky. Get some water, would you, and bring me some salt. I did as I was told, and I returned to watch anxiously as Etienne worked on my son with deft efficiency. He was very calm, and there was no indication in his manner that the patient differed in any respect from his others. Erik lay very still, watching him with guarded hostility. Are you Dr. Barrier? He had demanded wearily. Etienne smiled briefly in this acknowledgement. Why are you helping me? I am a doctor, said Etienne with a gentle patience that quite took me by surprise. It is my duty to help those who require my skills. You've been a very brave boy, Erik. I'm going to give you something that will help you sleep now. To my surprise and relief, Erik accepted the draught without a murmur of protest, and within a few minutes his breathing had become even and his eyes closed wearily. Etienne closed up the bag and stared at me in the face on the cushion. Now that he was no longer hiding behind the barriers of his professional dignity, I could see the shock, pity, and disbelief that crept into his eyes. He reached out and took my hand absently. I have never seen anything like this before, he said slowly. This is not a simple case of disfigurement. It's almost as though... He fell silent, groping for words and ideas that were just beyond the reach of a sharp mind. And I sensed the deep frustration of a man whose moment of inner vision confronts the insurmountable boundaries of existing language and knowledge. The mark defined two laws governing the ascent of life to higher stages. I heard him murmur to himself. Is it possible there could be another determining factor, a spontaneous alteration of the life form? His musings were beyond my comprehension. After a moment, he abandoned the vain struggle for expression and came to put his arms around me. I can't condone the behavior of the village, but at least I can understand it now. Madeleine, you can't possibly continue to keep him away from this house. He'll never leave you in peace after this. For his own sake, you must permit me to put him in a place of safety. An institution. An asylum for the insane. I covered my face with my hands, but Etienne pulled them gently away and forced me to look at him. I must face the truth, my darling. You can't contain him any longer in these four walls. I have heard enough to know that it is already quite beyond your control. Rightly or wrongly, the village fears him. And when you try to take him, it will be the same. Hatred, persecution, violence. This time it was the dog, next time it could be you. You have to think about your own safety, your own sanity. Sanity? I whispered uneasily. He shook his head gravely. Marie Perrault came to me this evening. She was very worried about you, Madeleine. She begged me to come and see you. Why else do you think I would come here without invitation? I tried to turn from him, but he caught my arm. I won't stand by and see you driven out of your mind for the sake of a freak accident of nature. I'm very sorry for the child. There's nothing I can do for him except put him beyond the reach of the ignorant. Etienne, no! Listen to me. Just listen. I'm gonna make arrangements, and when it's done, we'll go away from here. Far away where no one knows you. To a place where you can begin to forget. I love you, Madeleine. I know you love me. There's no reason in the world why we should not make our life together once we're free of this monstrous burden. Erik stirred on the sofa with a drowsy moan. Can he hear us? I demanded anxiously. I'd be astonished if he could. I gave him enough Londium to make him sleep clock round. Even so, I was uneasy. Picking up his bag and hat, I drew him out of the hall into the hall and closed the door. Once we were there, I handed him his belongings and asked him to go. Madeleine, he sighed, you haven't listened to a word I've said. Oh yes, I've listened, I've said. I've listened, and I've understood, and I've made up my mind. If I did as you suggest, I know I should only come to hate myself. And in time, I should begin to hate you. Go away from Fosterville, Etienne. Go right away and forget you ever saw me. That's all you can do now, because I won't abandon my child. Not even for you. He looked at me in despair. The midwife had no right to let him live, he said darkly. If I attempted his birth, he never would have drawn a single breath. I smiled faintly and touched his hand. You couldn't have done that, Etienne. You would have saved him just as you would have saved him now. You are a good Catholic. But I'm a bad doctor, he said grimly. A bad doctor and a very great fool. I said nothing. He put on his hat with dignity and opened the front door. I'm going back to Paris at the end of the month, he told me steadily. If you change your mind in the meantime, you know where to find me. I won't change my mind. He reached out and touched my cheek gently. No, he said sadly, I know that you won't. A moment more, he looked at me with regret, and then he was gone, striding down the path between the swaying beech trees without a backward glance. There were tears in my eyes as I locked the door, but my movements had a new purpose and steadiness. I was no longer operating like a sleepwalker in a trance. The dream was gone. I was awake now. Returning to the drawing room, I covered Erik with a blanket. He did not move, and I judged him to be deeply asleep. A strange calm came over me as I looked down on him, a curious sense of resignation. For the first time since his birth, I felt at peace with myself. I looked at the figure of the shepherd boy from the chair where I had dropped in the panic of the moment and placed it, without emancipation, upon the man's place where it belonged. It had no power to move now. I was no longer its mindless slave. I only had one child whose mind I had warped and twisted, whose affections I had spurned, and whose heart I had repeatedly broken. But I did not want him dead. I did not want him shut away. I did not want these things because I loved him. More than Etienne, and now at last more than myself. When I looked in the mirror in my room, I no longer saw a spoiled, inadequate child brooding bitterly on the cruelty of her fate. For the first time, I saw a grown woman in her place. It could not be too late to repair the harm that I had done. I would not let it be too late. Tomorrow, while he watched, I would gather all the mats together and throw them in the fire. The sun woke me, stealing over my face like a warm caress. Sitting up at the start, I glanced at the clock and saw with concern that it was already late morning. I had tumbled into bed the night before like a spent swimmer who had struggled it to a far-off shore and slept like the dead for almost 12 hours. Flinging a wrapper around my shoulders, I hurried downstairs to the drawing room, where the heavy curtains were still closed. Even in the dim gloom, I saw at once the room was empty. Erik? My voice echoed eerily in the gloomy silence, and my slippered footsteps seemed unnaturally loud as I ran back up the stairs. Erik, where are you? When I threw open the door of his room, shafts of harsh, brilliant light showed me full in the face and forced me to shield my bedazzled eyes with a gasp. It was a few moments before I was able to focus on the source of his cruel rays that I saw his odd collection of mirrors had been set out at angles around the broken remains of the shepherd boy. To reflect a maze of macabre images that took my breath away with shock, I knelt in the sunlight beside the high altar of a child's imagination, and stared dumbly at a message so plain, so unequivocal that might have been written across the glass in blood. I could see now that the figure had not been smashed in anger, but carefully severed by a glass cutter with ritual precision that left the head and limbs recognizably intact. I was looking at the remains of an execution, staring down a dismembered body that asked nothing more of me in this world except burial. I continued to kneel to the floor, surrounded by his few treasures, my father's architectural library, a cupboard full of musical scores, a chest stuffed with a weird collection of magical devices. The violin that I had given to him when he was 3 lay abandoned and forgotten at the foot of the bed. I could see they had taken nothing with him in his headlong flight from the house, and I knew, without looking, that my purse remained untouched on the chest of drawers in my room. The grim gesture of child's sacrifice showed me every painful thought which had led him to his final act of despair. I had given him life, but now he chose to take no more from me. And in the tomb-like silence of his sunlit room, his last unspoken words rang out in my ears like the tolling of a passing bell. Forget me. Okay.